Have you ever noticed that true mastery is born in moments of solitude? When darkness blankets the world and silence reigns, the masters continue their work, not because someone demands it, but because something within them refuses to rest. This is the sacred contract we make with ourselves, to pursue excellence, even when no witness stands to applaud our efforts. The difference between greatness and mediocrity often lies not in talent or opportunity, but in what we choose to do in those private moments when only we hold the scorecard of our efforts. This is where mastery begins, in the quiet corners of commitment where no external validation exists. Before we continue this journey together, I'd like to express my gratitude for your presence here. If you find value in these reflections, consider subscribing to join our community of seekers. When no one is watching, I work harder than when they're watching. This persistent and ever-present scorecard reminds me, no one's watching, which means now I must work. Otherwise, I'm full of empty promises to myself. The modern world trains us to perform for others, for likes, for applause, for recognition. Yet the masters throughout history have always understood a fundamental truth. The most powerful witness to your journey is yourself. Have you created an internal scorecard that holds you accountable when all external motivation disappears? Consider the martial artist in ancient temples, practicing the same form thousands of times beyond what any teacher required, or the musician who plays scales until their fingers bleed long after their instructor has gone home. This is not performance. This is practice. This is the forging of character through relentless commitment to what cannot be seen by others. I once met a young entrepreneur who slept on the cold floor of her gym beside her prototype. She would wake at dawn to iterate again, driven by a silent promise that her greatest victory would be owed only to the hours she logged in solitude. When her business eventually flourished, people called her an overnight success. She would simply smile, knowing the truth of those countless mornings when only she witnessed her struggle. The internal scorecard is not gentle. It does not make excuses or accept half measures. It asks, did I truly give everything today? Or did I hold back because no one was there to see my effort? This scorecard becomes the compass that guides you when the path grows dim. It is the voice that whispers, continue, when everyone else has gone to sleep. It reminds you that the most meaningful accomplishments are often invisible to others. They are the private victories of disciplined effort sustained over time. Look around you. The world is filled with people who perform when the spotlight shines upon them, but retreat into comfort when it dims. They build their lives around external validation, never developing the inner strength that comes from self-directed discipline. They remain fragile, dependent on others for motivation. You must ask yourself, who am I when no one is looking? What standard do I hold myself to when there is no external pressure to perform? The answer reveals not just your potential for mastery, but the very foundation of your character. Create your own standards that exceed what others would reasonably expect. When you finish a task that others would consider complete, ask yourself, is this truly my best work? Or did I stop because it was merely acceptable? Excellence is rarely found at the level of acceptable. The internal scorecard creates a powerful feedback loop. Each time you honor your private commitment, you strengthen your integrity. Each time you cut corners when no one is watching, you weaken it. Over time, these small choices compound into either mastery or mediocrity. Remember, the greatest masters in history were not those who performed impressively for others, but those who demanded more from themselves than anyone else ever could. They understood that true mastery is not about impressing others, it's about the relentless pursuit of your highest potential, witnessed or not. When you're growing in a business, it's very painful. When you're stagnating in a business and plateaued, it's very painful. When you're declining, it's very painful. All conditions of reality are painful. If pain is a prerequisite for reality, then it's just a signal that we are alive. Rather than seeing pain as a problem, it is a signal that I'm breathing. Pain is the universal language of growth, yet from our earliest moments, we are taught to avoid it, to run from it, to medicate it away. What if you viewed pain differently, not as an enemy to vanquish, but as a teacher to embrace? In the Shaolin tradition, we understand that growth requires passing through discomfort. A young monk once approached his master and asked, "Why must training be so painful?" The master replied by taking a stick and striking the ground repeatedly in the same spot. Eventually, a hole formed. The hole, he said, is not created by the strength of the blow, but by its persistence through resistance. Consider how a muscle grows. It must first be torn, damaged through effort beyond its comfort. In that recovery, that precise point of pain, lies the opportunity for new strength. Without resistance, without that necessary suffering, no growth occurs. The Qi. Pain itself is not the enemy, it is the doorway. When you begin anything meaningful, a business, a relationship, a creative pursuit, discomfort is inevitable. The question is not whether you will experience pain, but how you will interpret it when it arrives. Will you see it as a signal to retreat, or as confirmation that you are alive and engaged in something worthy of your full attention? Look at your own life. Where have you grown the most? Was it during periods of comfort and ease, or during challenges that pushed you beyond what you thought possible? Most of us discover our greatest strengths during our darkest moments, not because suffering is virtuous, but because it demands resources we didn't know we possessed. The entrepreneur who sleeps on the gym floor doesn't do so because it's comfortable. She does it because she understands that temporary discomfort is the price of eventual mastery. The pain of sacrifice today creates the foundation for abundance tomorrow. When you feel resistance rising within you, the desire to quit, to take the easier path, to retreat into comfort, recognize this as the very moment where growth becomes possible. This discomfort is not a warning to stop. It is an invitation to continue. Pain also serves as our most honest teacher. When something hurts, it demands our attention. It forces presence in a way that pleasure rarely does. Have you noticed how clearly you can see reality when you're in discomfort? How the non-essential falls away? This insight doesn't mean we seek suffering for its own sake. That would be foolish. Rather, it means we develop a new relationship with the inevitable discomfort that accompanies any worthwhile pursuit. We learn to say, "This hurts and that's okay. This is what alive feels like." You will face moments where the pain seems unnecessary, where the easiest choice would be to numb it or avoid it altogether. In those moments, remember, the quality of your life will be determined not by how much pain you avoid, but by how much meaning you extract from the pain you cannot escape. Pain is not the opposite of joy. It is often the pathway to it. The most luminous moments of accomplishment usually follow periods of sustained effort and discomfort. The summit is sweet precisely because the climb was steep. Hard work is the goal. It's not like work hard so that X, because as soon as you have a "so that," then the X is the thing. But if the goal is to work as hard as we possibly can, then the only real output we have is who we become along the way. The modern world is obsessed with destinations. We celebrate the medal, the promotion, the acquisition, but rarely do we honor the thousands of hours that precede these moments. This fixation on outcomes rather than process creates a perpetual cycle of dissatisfaction. Have you noticed how quickly the joy of achievement fades, replaced by hunger for the next milestone? What if instead you fell in love with the process itself? What if you derived your primary satisfaction not from reaching destinations, but from the quality of your effort along the journey? In the Shaolin tradition, a student once asked, "Master, how long until I achieve mastery?" The master replied, 10 years of daily practice." Frustrated, the student asked, "What if I practice twice as hard?" The master thought for a moment and said 20 years. This paradox contains a profound truth. When we fixate on the destination, we miss the very path that leads to mastery. The entrepreneur sleeping on the gym floor doesn't endure this discomfort merely to reach some future state of success. She has learned to find meaning in the struggle itself. Each iteration, each failure, each small victory becomes not just a means to an end, but a moment of growth to be appreciated for its own sake. This shift in perspective, from outcome to process, transforms the experience of effort. What once felt like sacrifice becomes satisfaction, What once seemed like delay becomes development. The person who loves walking walks further than the person who loves the destination. Look at any field of human achievement. Those who sustain excellence over decades aren't primarily motivated by external rewards. They've developed a fascination with the minute details of their craft. The chef, who tastes 100 variations of the same sauce. The writer who revises a paragraph 20 times. The athlete who practices the same movement until it becomes second nature. They've all discovered the secret. Mastery lives in the repetition, not just the result. When you fall in love with the process, something remarkable happens. Time expands. Hours of practice no longer feel like deprivation, but like exploration. The question changes from how quickly can I finish to how deeply can I engage. This doesn't mean you abandon goals entirely. Rather, you hold them lightly, using them as direction rather than definition. Your value is not determined by whether you reach a particular outcome, but by the quality of attention you bring to each step along the way. Consider how this might transform your daily experience. The report you're writing is no longer just a task to complete, but an opportunity to refine your thinking. The conversation with a colleague becomes not merely an exchange of information, but a chance to deepen understanding. Each moment contains its own inherent value, independent of where it might lead. This approach also builds resilience. When inevitable setbacks occur, they don't destroy your sense of purpose, because your satisfaction wasn't dependent on a single outcome. You can adjust, adapt, and continue the journey with your core motivation intact. Fall in love with the process, and you'll never work a day in your life. Not because it won't be hard, but because the work itself will contain its own rewards. The joy is in the doing, not just in the done. The only person who can judge you on your success is you, because you're the only one who knows how much left in the tank you really had. In a world of constant evaluation, likes, comments, reviews, feedback, we've outsourced the assessment of our efforts to others. But external validation is both fickle and flawed. Those who judge from the outside can see only results, never intention. They witness the performance but miss the preparation. They applaud the achievement without understanding the sacrifice. What if you reclaimed that power of judgment? What if you became the primary assessor of your own efforts, measuring not just what you accomplished, but how wholly you committed yourself to the task? I remember a student who performed a form perfectly during an examination. Everyone praised his technical precision. Later, in private, he approached me with disappointment in his eyes. "I held back," he confessed. "I was afraid of making a mistake, so I didn't give everything." No one else could see this truth. Only he knew how much remained in his tank. His external success couldn't mask his internal knowing. True mastery requires this ruthless self-honesty. It demands that you acknowledge both your effort and your evasions, your courage and your compromises. External praise can never fill the gap left by knowing you gave less than you could have. Similarly, external criticism loses its sting when you know with certainty that you gave everything possible. This internal assessment isn't about harsh self-judgment. It's about clarity. It's about developing the capacity to see yourself accurately without the distortion of either pride or shame. It's about asking, did I truly show up today? Did I bring my full attention, my complete effort, my honest engagement to this task? When you become your own most trusted judge, something powerful happens. You no longer perform for the applause of others. You no longer shrink for fear of their criticism. You develop an authenticity that comes from alignment between your private commitments and your public actions. This doesn't mean you ignore all feedback. Wise teachers and honest critics can offer valuable perspective. But you receive their input differently, not as the final verdict on your worth, but as information to consider against the backdrop of your own knowing. The marketplace will always have its opinions. Critics will praise or condemn based on their own preferences and projections. Audiences will respond according to their tastes and trends. These external responses may affect your strategy, but they need not determine your sense of success. You alone know the full context of your work. You alone understand what obstacles you overcame, what fears you faced, what limitations you worked within. You alone can accurately assess the gap between what you did and what you were capable of doing. This self-assessment becomes particularly crucial during what many call the lonely chapter. That period when you're no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. During this transition, external validation often disappears entirely. Friends may question your choices, family may express concern, the market may ignore your efforts. In these moments, your internal compass becomes your only reliable guide. Trust yourself enough to be honest about your efforts. When you fall short, acknowledge it without excuses. When you give everything, recognize that achievement regardless of the outcome. This integrity with yourself becomes the foundation upon which all lasting success is built. There's a tremendous amount of hours and work that it takes to be great at one thing. There's this oh no moment when you realize that there are so few things that you can be great at. The discipline comes down to saying, what are the 2 or 3 things that I can be really good at in my life? Because it will take me 5 to 7 years to be exceptional at this one thing. In a world that celebrates multitasking and diverse accomplishments, the path to mastery seems almost contrarian. While others spread themselves thin across many domains, the master understands a fundamental truth. Exceptional skill requires exceptional focus. Have you felt the pull to do everything, only to realize you're doing nothing deeply? The Shaolin tradition teaches us that mastery begins with limitation. A young monk once complained to his master about the repetitive nature of his training, performing the same basic movements day after day. I want to learn all the forms, all the weapons, he protested. The master handed him a cup and began pouring tea until it overflowed onto the monk's hands. Like this cup, the master explained, your mind is full of your own preferences. How can I teach you mastery until you empty it? This lesson extends beyond martial arts. Consider any field of human excellence. The master chef focuses on perfecting a few signature dishes rather than producing an encyclopedic menu. The legendary investor develops deep expertise in specific sectors rather than chasing every market trend. The renowned writer cultivates a distinctive voice rather than mimicking every literary style. Our entrepreneur sleeping on the gym floor didn't try to launch 10 businesses simultaneously. She poured her entire being into one venture, understanding that fragmented attention yields fragmented results. Her singular focus allowed her to notice details, solve problems, and develop insights that would have remained invisible had her attention been divided. This narrowing of focus often feels like sacrifice. In choosing what to master, you must also choose what to abandon, at least temporarily. This creates a fear of missing out, anxiety that by committing deeply to one path, you might be overlooking better opportunities elsewhere. But consider this paradox. The narrower your focus, the wider your possibilities ultimately become. Deep expertise in one area often transfers in surprising ways to others. The disciplines you develop, the patterns you recognize, the problem-solving approaches you master, these become portable assets that enhance everything you touch. Look at your own life. Where have you scattered your attention so broadly that you've prevented yourself from reaching exceptional levels in anything? What would happen if you redirected those dispersed energies into 1 or 2 key areas, not forever, but for the 5 to 7 years required to develop true expertise? This concentration of effort doesn't mean you become one-dimensional. Rather, it means you build a core of excellence from which you can later expand. Instead of being mediocre at 12 things, what if you became extraordinary at 2 or 3? How would that transform not just your results, but your sense of self? The world rewards specialized expertise far more generously than it rewards generalized competence. The most valuable contributors in any field are those who have gone deep enough to see what others miss, to solve problems others cannot solve, to create value others cannot create. Narrowing your focus doesn't mean abandoning curiosity or limiting your growth. Instead, it means channeling your curiosity through the prism of your chosen discipline. It means asking how each new piece of information or experience relates to your core area of development. Choose carefully what you'll master, understanding that this choice will shape not just what you do, but who you become. Then commit with your whole heart, giving yourself the gift of depth in a world drowning in shallowness. Output is volume times leverage. How many times you do the thing times how much you get for each time you do it. Do you work smart or do you work hard? You do both. You do as many reps as you possibly can, and you do it with the most leverage possible. We often find ourselves trapped in a false dichotomy. Should I work harder or should I work smarter? This question misses a fundamental truth that masters have always understood. Exceptional achievement requires both volume and leverage, quantity and quality, repetition and refinement. Have you been emphasizing one at the expense of the other? In the East, we speak of Kung Fu not merely as martial arts, but as any skill cultivated through time and effort. The character for Kung Gong represents achievement or merit, while Fu Fu suggests time spent. Together, they express the unity of dedicated practice and meaningful result. Consider the musician who plays scales for hours each day. This volume of practice alone won't create mastery if it's done mindlessly. Yet strategy without volume, understanding music theory without touching the instrument, creates knowledge without skill. True mastery emerges when high-volume practice meets high-quality attention. The entrepreneur sleeping on the gym floor demonstrates this principle perfectly. She doesn't just work long hours, volume, she works with intense focus, constantly refining her approach based on feedback, leverage. Each iteration teaches her something new that makes the next attempt more effective. Over time, this creates a compounding effect where each unit of effort produces increasingly powerful results. This formula, output equals volume times leverage, applies universally. The writer who produces 1,000 words daily while continuously studying the craft. The athlete who performs countless repetitions while constantly refining technique. The business leader who makes hundreds of decisions while continuously improving their mental models. Examine your own approach. Have you been emphasizing volume without leverage, working frantically but ineffectively? Or have you focused on strategy without execution, planning endlessly but acting rarely? Either imbalance limits your potential for mastery. Volume without leverage creates exhaustion. You work harder and harder with diminishing returns, eventually burning out without achieving breakthrough. This is the hamster wheel of busyness that traps so many ambitious people. Leverage without volume creates theoretical knowledge, without practical skill. You understand how things should work, but lack the embodied expertise that comes only through repetition. This is the planning trap that prevents many intelligent people from achieving tangible results. The masters combine both elements. They understand that volume creates the conditions for leverage to emerge. Through sheer repetition, they notice subtle patterns and opportunities for improvement that remain invisible to the occasional practitioner. As the saying goes, when I do something, I see it. When I do something 1,000 times, I understand it. This approach transforms your relationship with failure. Each unsuccessful attempt becomes not just acceptable, but valuable. It's another repetition that builds both skill and insight. The person who makes 100 attempts, even if most fail, typically achieves more than the person who makes 3 perfect plans, but rarely acts. The leverage component of this formula evolves naturally through deliberate practice. As you accumulate experience, you develop what experts call perceptual cognitive skills, the ability to notice relevant details, recognize patterns, anticipate outcomes, and make rapid adjustments. These skills dramatically increase the return on each unit of effort. Begin by embracing volume. Commit to regular, consistent practice in your chosen domain. Then gradually increase leverage by bringing more attention, more reflection, and more refinement to each repetition. Over time, this combination creates the compound interest of mastery, small improvements that accumulate into extraordinary capability. There have been so many times in my life where I knew I needed to do something, and then I filled all this extra time not doing that thing. And then the moment I did it, I realized, wow, that took way less time than I thought it. was going to take. Not only that, it took way less time than it took me to delay actually getting to this point. In the space between intention and action lies a wasteland of potential. Moments, hours, sometimes years of hesitation that produce nothing but delay and doubt. This gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it may be the single greatest obstacle to mastery. How much energy have you spent preparing to work rather than actually working? The Shaolin tradition teaches an important principle. If it is time to sweep the floor, sweep the floor. This seemingly simple instruction contains profound wisdom about the nature of productivity and presence. It suggests that each moment has its own appropriate action, and our task is not to resist or delay, but to respond directly. Consider how often we postpone the essential while engaging in what feels like preparation. We organize our desk before writing. We research more before deciding. We wait for the perfect mood before creating. This delay rarely serves us. It merely prolongs the distance between intention and completion. Our entrepreneur sleeping on the gym floor didn't have the luxury of deliberation. Each morning brought immediate challenges, requiring immediate response. This necessity became her advantage. She learned to collapse the gap between recognizing a need and addressing it. While competitors were still planning, she was iterating, learning, and advancing. This shrinking of the gap applies to every domain of mastery. The writer who begins typing immediately after sitting down. The athlete who starts the workout without an extended warm-up ritual. The business leader who makes decisions promptly rather than deferring them indefinitely. Each develops a capacity for immediate engagement that compounds over time. Look at your own patterns. How much energy do you expend in transition, in the mental and emotional preparation before actually beginning? What would happen if you simply started immediately, trusting that engagement itself would generate the focus and motivation you're waiting to feel before beginning? This doesn't mean acting impulsively or without thought. Rather, it means recognizing that action often creates clarity faster than contemplation. It means understanding that momentum itself is a powerful force that, once generated, carries you forward with less effort than was required to begin. The gap between tasks also deserves attention. How long do you typically pause between completing one task and beginning the next? These transition periods often expand unconsciously, consuming productive hours in what feels like necessary recovery, but is often simply habit. Masters develop the ability to move directly from one focused engagement to another with minimal delay. They understand that starting is typically harder than continuing, so they maintain momentum rather than repeatedly overcoming inertia. This approach doesn't deny the value of rest and reflection. Proper recovery is essential for sustained performance, but it distinguishes between intentional breaks and unconscious delay, between restorative pauses and procrastination. Begin practicing this principle today. When you finish reading these words, move immediately to your next task without an extended transition. When you wake tomorrow, engage directly with your most important work before the day's distractions intervene. As you develop this habit, you'll discover that much of what felt like necessary preparation was actually unnecessary hesitation. The ability to collapse the gap between intention and action may be the most practical superpower you can develop. It transforms potential into reality, converting finite time into tangible results. It allows you to accomplish in hours what others require days to complete, not through frantic activity, but through the elimination of delay. As we come to the end of our exploration, I invite you to turn these principles inward through honest self-reflection. Consider these questions not as an intellectual exercise, but as a mirror to reveal your current relationship with mastery. When was the last time you worked at your absolute limit with nothing left in reserve? Not for recognition, not for reward, but simply to discover what you're capable of. What pain are you currently avoiding that might actually be the doorway to your next level of growth? What discomfort have you reframed from obstacle to opportunity? Where have you scattered your attention so broadly that you've prevented yourself from developing exceptional capability in anything? What 2 or 3 areas deserve your deepest focus? How much of your self-assessment comes from external validation versus your own integrity with yourself. When external praise and criticism fade, what remains? What gaps exist between your intentions and your actions? How might you collapse these gaps to convert potential into reality? If the process itself were the reward, if the journey never ended in a destination, would you still choose the path you're on? Does your daily experience contain its own inherent value? These questions have no perfect answers, only honest ones. The clarity they provide becomes the foundation for deliberate practice and continuous growth. The path to mastery is not a sprint but a pilgrimage, a journey that transforms not just what you can do but who you become. It begins with the courage to commit deeply when others remain casual, to embrace discomfort when others seek ease, to focus intensely when others scatter their attention. Remember that masters are not born but forged, through thousands of hours of deliberate practice, through countless moments of choosing the difficult right over the easy wrong, through the daily decision to show up fully even when no one is watching. Your greatest achievements will rarely be witnessed in real time. They will emerge from those private victories accumulated in solitude, from the quality of your effort when external validation is absent, from your capacity to continue when progress seems imperceptible. Begin today, not with grandiose plans or perfect conditions, but with immediate engagement in whatever stands before you. Shrink the gap between intention and action. Fall in love with the process itself. Create your own scorecard and hold yourself to it with unwavering integrity. The world doesn't need more casual practitioners. It needs more masters, individuals who have dedicated themselves to excellence in their chosen domain, who bring full presence and commitment to their craft, who understand that greatness emerges not from talent alone, but from relentless, focused effort sustained over time. You have this capacity within you. The question is not whether mastery is possible, but whether you are willing to pay its price in focus, persistence, and wholehearted engagement. The answer to that question will determine not just what you accomplish, but who you become. See you next time. Keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and your spirit evolving.